A lot of it is about creating that trust, first of all, in the workplace. There still isn't in every workplace that. It's getting better. It is definitely getting better. But creating a safe environment is really important for people to start sharing that they have a condition they may have, or they just think in a different way. So quite often for me, it's about doing an introductory session. The one thing I keep coming up against is so a little bit about myself. I'm dyslexic, was diagnosed at 7 years old, and I didn't like that diagnosis. I think that's really important to say. Me and it were not friends. We were not friends for a very, very long time, and there's several reasons for that. And I still find that funny now, actually, thinking I really didn't like this thing because that's how I saw it. And yet now, that's what I live and breathe all day. And I'm like, wow, I wish it hadn't taken me so long to accept my condition, understand it, but actually understand myself. And my background is HR and operations, and I witnessed a lot of people suffering in silence in the workplace. I was one of them. But what I found was I was helping other people, and I was like, you blimmin' hypocrite. You're helping everyone else, but you're not being open. You got to lead by example. And I had this kind of thing that you couldn't be dyslexic in HR. You couldn't be a senior manager in HR. You couldn't be a senior manager and being dyslexic. And I'm kind of going, well, you are a senior manager, you are in HR, and you are dyslexic. So you've kind of poo-pooed that. So now let's be really open about it. And I was really open, and I started putting it on my emails. And don't get me wrong, I did get some unusual comments. You don't look dyslexic.
That's
wow. I did have one person actually ask me how I do my job, which I kind of, and it was said in the way of that questioning side of it of, can we actually have a dyslexic HR manager? Yes, you can. But the majority of it, and I say 95%, was about that support, intrigue. How do you do things? Can we learn? And the amount of people that then came out of the woodwork going, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So am I. Please tell me how you got to where you are. I never thought that was possible for me. And that's where I was like, wow, I'd felt all alone for so long. And it was like I was coming home. I suddenly had a family. And that to me was really endearing. And that's where I was like, do you know what? I just want to live and breathe this. I want to help people. I want companies to understand what they can do and what small changes they need to make. And that is what I do. So I educate companies on it, and I work with individuals.
Kirsty, it's incredible to hear that, and what was really inspiring is your face kind of lit up when you mentioned about that you struggled in that sense, and then you felt like you found a family and you found like a real community in that sense. What was that like then? Because pre finding the family and the community and all these things, there must have been kind of times where you did feel, as you mentioned, alone, and no one really understood what it was that you were going through, and you couldn't relate to anyone. And then you had to go through a real, I guess, a real struggle, one to bring out your dyslexia in your personal life, but also your dyslexia in the work life, which is, as you said, if you're in that sort of role. What was that kind of like, that journey from feeling alone to finding the community?
It was a difficult journey, I'm not going to lie. There were, I had situations in the workplace that compounded the fact of why I should keep it quiet. I remember having a manager in one of my roles asked if they needed an interpreter to understand my emails. That was in an open plan office in front of 30-odd members of staff, and I was 18. I got up, I used language which one shouldn't use in the workplace, and I left. I got my bag up and walked out and got home and was like, oh, I've got to go back tomorrow. And I did. And he was very, very apologetic. But I then had made the decision that that wasn't the right location for me to work. So there were bits that compounded why I was keeping it quiet. The turning point for me was two things. One was having my son, who is clearly dyslexic and ADHD as well. And I didn't want him to feel alone. That was a non-negotiable. That was not happening. And it really was a case of, do you know what then? This thing you've been avoiding, I've been sweeping it under the carpet, and that dust under the carpet been getting bigger and bigger. And it's like, right, I actually now need to rip it off and I need to learn about it, because nobody had explained it to me. It was literally, you're going to struggle. But yet at school, I had one other person in my class who was dyslexic. She was in the top set for English. I was in the bottom. So it still didn't, it just didn't relate to me. So when I started to research it, I learned about the positives and the strengths. And then I learned, and that made sense about who I was. And I was like, wow. And when I actually became open in the workplace, finding other people was just, oh, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just like finding friends and family, because nobody got it. When people go, oh, yeah, I get it must be difficult to spell. Do you? Do you really? I mean, when people go, oh, just look it up in the dictionary. Brilliant. I'll look up phenomenal in the dictionary. I'm going to start with pho.
Under F, yeah, I guess it's, that brings you on to kind of the common misconceptions. And we see this a lot where people believe, take dyslexia, for instance, that it is just reading and writing, and that's purely it. And if you're able to help someone read, I don't know, that certain piece of text, then you're done. But it's so much more, isn't it, than just reading and writing?
It's loads more to it. It's, my processing speed is a lot slower. I take longer to read. I cannot read if people are talking to me, or if there's a radio on or television. That's not going to work for me. My organisation, I find it quite ironic in some ways. In the workplace, everyone's like, oh, you're so organised. It's like, yes, I work really hard at that. I have no shame in saying that I'm 46 years old and I still lay my clothes out the night before I go to bed. That is my routine.
Have you always done that?
I've done that from when I was probably, I think I started doing it at school, and kind of my mum made me do it at school, and it carried on. And when I had kids, I did it for them. But I realised actually it was my clothes that were important. It just helped that flow in the morning work. And I am meticulous with my organisation. I have a food planner. My food shopping arrives at the same time every week, because that's how my life works best. And people are like, that's really quite organised. And I'm like, yes, because if I'm not, it goes to pot.
And I think if we talked about dyslexia, for instance, and this is where I believe the scale, from a personal point of view, where the scale differs, because I have dyslexia and I have ADHD, and I don't do any of those things. I like to do those things. I think I would benefit massively had I done those things, but I don't. Although I don't physically do those things, in my head, I'm doing those things. Does that make sense? So I'm thinking, I must plan this out. I must plan that out. But I am lastminute.com in hoping, I guess, that it will work out, and then I will work out. And I don't know if that's just the ADHD part, the dyslexia. I still can't kind of work that out. But I realize that it is like tempting fate, really, within that side of it. So I feel like I go through that working motion, what you do, but I guess I don't execute it in that sense. So if we were using the terminology, well, just dyslexia is just reading and writing, or dyslexia, you're very organized or you're not organized. I guess this is where the scale, isn't it? That it differs.
Yeah.
Massively.
It's the scale. And I think it's also, like we were talking about strategies, I know they're actually my non-negotiables. I've done them for so long, they are now habitual to me. But also when I don't do certain things, I feel like I'm losing control. And then that comes into play, though, with that dyslexia. So even in the sense of morning routines I have. I mean, the picture you played at the start with all the bits of nature, I love that. Nature to me is so grounding. It calms me. And if I'm having a day where I find I'm getting more frustrated with some of my dyslexia, I go outside, I take my socks off and I stand on the grass.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, it's all right. You've got this. And I think a lot of the, the anxiety, the nervousness, those internal feelings, that's what's built up over the years. And yes, I've worked really hard to work on that. But there are still times when in my mind, I'll go back to an 8, 10, 18-year-old Kirsty where I was struggling against this because I didn't want it. And for me, acceptance has been absolutely fundamental.
Do you think acceptance? Not everyone I've spoken to, but the majority of people I feel, and I've done this. Acceptance plays such a big part in it, and I don't know whether it's that feeling lost beforehand, and that you're just, I guess you're craving for a community that gets you, or something. So once you find that acceptance, do you find that acceptance then goes into a lot of other things and then not hinders you, but sometimes brings the anxiety if you don't feel accepted in certain situations? Or do you feel that you've not mastered some coping mechanisms and you can highlight it better? But do you feel that acceptance is played in lots of different parts within your life, or do you feel you've parted that?
No, I think it is a key part. So acceptance was actually all about also accepting myself and understanding myself, and in a way liking myself and just understanding how I worked. That's really key. And there were still times within my working life, literally in the last 3 years, I would say, where I didn't feel so accepted or understood.
Yeah.
So it does still come up. And even though I was trying to explain it, I still felt like that outsider. And when I look at it, quite often it was because I was surrounded by a lot of neurotypical people. Normally that acceptance for me, it's like a buddy kind of thing. If there's one other person, it just calms it.
So what kind of, so did you go down the route of being diagnosed, or was...
My mum picked it up really when I was 7. So she did that diagnosis when I was 7. And, I think, and this is just my personal opinion, but I think there's a lot of work that still can be done around how that diagnosis, that's a good word, isn't it? Make that another bit of I love about it. That diagnosis, how it's shared and explained to parents and also to that child, in my case, because nothing was really explained properly. And I appreciate, this was going back to like the 1980s, but it was very much about, you've got a problem, you're going to struggle. It wasn't, do you know what? You learn differently. Your brain's wired slightly differently. Isn't that amazing? If it had been explained like that, I would have seen it in more of a like, oh, okay, rather than a heavy weight that was put around my ankle. And when I put that I really found it hard, I actually considered not having children because I was scared about passing it on to my kids.
Because of the struggles that you went through yourself.
Yeah.
And that's life changes, isn't it? That's life-changing decisions that you were contemplating because of the effects that it had on you.
Yeah. I wanted to be a parent so much that won over. But those thoughts went through my head. Do I really want to inflict this pain on somebody else?
Wow.
It's 50-50.
It is. And
it's 50-50 in the sense that their father's neurotypical. So in my head, it was 50-50.
But absolutely. And it's just, I guess it's getting across, isn't it? When you go into organizations or we're having these conversations, the how much more it is than just reading and writing, and the effects it can have. So you now go into organizations, and you do, the incredible work in there. What's the kind of the the initial kind of conversations that you're having within this? What kind of, not say barriers are being put up, but the understandings that you have to kind of, I say break through, you have to kind of create that understanding. What does that kind of look like for anyone that's watching?
It's a lot of it is about creating that trust, first of all, in the workplace. There still isn't in every workplace that. It's getting better. It is definitely getting better. But creating a safe environment is really important for people to start sharing that they have a condition they may have, or they just think in a different way. So quite often for me, it's about doing an introductory session. The one thing I'm keep coming up against is we want managers to know how to work with their neurodiverse team members. And I go, right, are you telling me that all your managers are neurotypical? Well, yeah, we believe so. I'm going to say no. So it's still getting that barrier down of managers and senior managers potentially not having neurodiverse conditions. And that to me is like, we need to get rid of that kind of thought process.
Absolutely. And I guess that is, isn't it? But, especially coming from a HR point of view, I guess they generally think that, if you're dealing with someone who has dyslexia or ADHD or neurodivergent, then, that's a job for HR, and they just go through the process and create tangible forms and some training, stuff like that, and then it's done. But as we know, it literally needs to start kind of from I use the analogy from business terms, top to the bottom, whatever, the CEO from all the way through has to be that understanding throughout the entire organization. Otherwise, you won't be able to create that consistency of understanding.
Yeah. And I did a talk for a charity a while ago, and it was lovely that actually CEO was on the call. I had no idea they were on the call. And at the end, they came on and they went, do you know what? I want to share with everybody. I struggle with this. And I was kind of like, yes, that's what we need, because the reaction on people's faces and words and even afterwards was, wow, they just felt more comfortable to be open and honest. So I do think it starts with a lot more people of senior management level being more open. And I think the other thing is, when I kind of mention the word reasonable adjustments, it's as if I've kind of spent £500,000 of the budget. I'm kind of going, no, chill out, it's fine. There are so many things that can be done that are low cost, but it's also a lot of things and strategies that I will talk about. They help everybody. I mean, I'm at a standing desk. That's great for me, but that's great for people with back problems. I've used them with pregnant people as bumps have grown. We've just adjusted the desk up. There's so many different strategies that will help everybody.
Yeah. And I just jumping into the comments. Thank you so much. Absolutely love the whole organization view. And you're absolutely right. I don't know why. I guess, again, speaking to different organizations, some doing incredible work still, depending on where they are within the journey. But it's interesting when and you mentioned budget and things. I get from a business point of view, we have to look at the bottom line. They always say, how is this going to help? And blah, blah, all the different strategic strategy words and buzzwords and everything else. But it's funny, isn't it? And I use that term loosely, that when they look at the actual budget, how much do they want to invest in their people? Because that's the thing. If we just said, okay, well, we've got Dyslexia Awareness Week coming up, so we need to get a speaker. We need to get someone in and do this. But that in itself it can be really positive on one aspect and detrimental in another. Because if an organization said to you, Kirsty, we love to hear you talk at the Dyslexia show. We'd love you to come into an organization, which I'm sure you've done, and just do a talk on awareness. And then that's it. And it has to then be, okay, so I've done this. I will do this awareness talk. What next? Now, I'd always say, whenever I'm asked to go into an organization, I'd say, okay, if you book me for speaking, that's fine. But what next? Now, I'm not saying you then need to book me for other things within your organization, but what is your plan after? What is your duty of care after? Because as I know, and I'm sure, Kirsty, if you went into an organization and spoke to 60 individuals or 100 individuals, they will have questions afterwards, and they will then need to go through a certain process. Have you found that? I'm not spitballing kind of different organizations, but is that the kind of mindset that you have to have when you think to yourself, if I open this Pandora's box in an organization, I have this duty of care, and I need to make sure that I do that side of it?
Yeah, and exactly that. For me, as much as, I love talking about it because, yes, it's raising that awareness, but that I don't want it to be a tick box exercise.
Yeah.
It happens so much, and it's kind of like exactly that. What are the next steps? What are we going to look at? And there is still so much that needs to be done. Changing the terminology of how we onboard people, even at that recruitment scenario, for me, the word reasonable adjustments, I don't like that word, and that's just me personally. I just think there's a more positive way we can do that. What's the supporting mechanisms to enhance your interview process? Anything like that would just make it. I just don't want it to be this reasonable adjustment. It's not a reasonable adjustment. You want the best out of me? Let me give it to you if you give me a couple of things.
Do you find that when you mentioned reasonable adjustments, and I'm with you 100%, because you look on job adverts, when you're working with clients, and they say, we're looking to apply for a job, and the key question is, do I put down that I have dyslexia or ADHD or whatnot? And I've got to admit, personally, from a personal point of view, the thought goes from my mind that I'm still, undecided on some situations.
Mm-hmm.
In my own head, in the sense of should you, shouldn't you? And that's purely on the basis of looking into the organization and seeing how they work. Now, the only thing I'd say is I'd always say, you have to be truthful and honest, but it's personally down to you. If you're open about the fact that you have dyslexia and it's, and you want to do that, then that's fine. You get the final decision. But you have to be a little bit kind of guarded and a bit protective, because if you're going into an organization that hasn't got that awareness and those things in place, and then you don't say that you have dyslexia, then the match from the off isn't going to be a very easy or pleasurable thing for that side of it. So what's your thoughts on that, Kirsty?
My thoughts are, I wouldn't actually want to work for an organization that wasn't doing what it should do. I won't say needs, because I don't agree with it being a need. I think it's what you should do to kind of support your employees. Yeah. I wouldn't want to work for an organization that doesn't even have some understanding and is wanting to improve. So for me, I would actually drop my dyslexia in within the strengths area somehow. So if someone's talking to me about the strengths, I would probably say, one of my strengths is problem solving, which is one of the beautiful things that comes with my dyslexia, and carry on.
See, and that goes back to the earlier conversation you had, where someone turns around and says, "Oh, you learn differently," or the way that your brain works, and the way it's that positive, almost like people say an affirmation, but it's not. It's just this way of really kind of turning this negative that's continuously seen a negative, and we always do. I'd say I'm not too sure who's marketed around dyslexia as well. If we look at all of the marketing towards dyslexia in everything, it's almost I can't. Apart from the motivational, you can be like Branson and the other bits and pieces. We generally play on the weakness and the struggles, and then we come up with the strengths side of it. So we have to. I guess we have to try and find a way of being able to change that when we're looking to go into organizations, because if we're seeing it and we're in the community and we're in the sector, so to speak, then from the outside, where they have very little knowledge about this, then I guess they're only going to be picking up some of the weaknesses in their eyes.
And I think we lead with our strengths, and also in my mind, my strengths are also what help me come up with the strategies for the areas I find more challenging. And I'm seeing more and more employees now that are applying for jobs and going, what can you as an organization do for me? That retention of staff is key. And if you make your staff feel valued, they're going to be more productive, they're going to stay. So I think as an organization, sometimes it is looking and going, let's retain our staff. You cannot rebuy, if someone's in an organization for 6 years, all of that company knowledge, that company relationship, if that goes, that's a massive decrease to that company. It's not just that financial cost of recruiting. And I think it's people buy from people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to share Amy, her comment says people don't leave jobs, they leave organizations and managers at times because they're not willing to support the neurodiversity in the workplace. Now, and you alluded to this beautifully earlier in the conversation, you mentioned about the recruitment process, and it starts from the recruitment process. How do we first encourage people to work for organizations, but then how do we welcome them on, for the onboarding? How do we continue working cohesively together? And it is, if we were to write a business plan in that sense, and people talked about retaining staff and recruitment, the amount of money I'm sure organizations, we've had organizations before, and I know how much recruitment can cost, but also the well-being of staff and how to retain them. Do you think and I think in this day and age as well, the recruitment process is a very difficult one for someone who struggles with some of it, because everything's online now. Everything is online. And when you go up to the next kind of level of a seniority within that position, there's those tests. I can't remember what they're called. Is it not
aptitude ones?
The aptitude test, where they test all of these different skills. And the different jargon on there is we're going to test your the response time. We're going to test your English. We're also going to check memory. We're going to check all these things. And this is the thing. If you apply for these positions, you'd probably be really, really good at the actual job. But it's that stage. And I remember speaking to an organization we did some work for, and I won't mention the name, but very huge global organization. And myself and my partner worked with them for 3 years. And they said the amount of people that they lost through that process was immense, because they couldn't grasp those things. And when they tweaked it and changed it, the actual intake of staff was unbelievable. Just those 3 tests. There was 5 tests in total. They got rid of 3. They tweaked 3 of them, and it completely changed.
Totally. And I think we just need to open our eyes up. You say about the recruitment thing, even job descriptions, the word excellent. So if we said excellent communication skills or excellent written skills, that word excellent, I went and got a B in my English language and English literature GCSE. I'm incredibly proud of that. I would never use the word excellent to describe my English or my written communication. So straight away, that word is going to put me off applying for a job. It could be such a small element. And do they really mean excellent? What does that mean to them compared to what it means to me?
On what scale is excellent? How do they? Yes. How do you manage the word excellent? Is that?
Yeah. So there's a lot that needs to be done. And that, being in HR, I've seen job descriptions, and I'm like, you're wanting everything. Let's really be sensible here about what the core things are of a role.
Why do you think we've done? I mean, I've been in jobs and business, I feel like, forever now, at the age of 46, and I've just done. I remember, myself, and my partner, writing job descriptions out, for our companies back in the day, and I look at some of them now, and they're like, like essays, and certain buzzwords in there. Why do you think we've got to that stage where it's almost, I almost see it's like it's 3 different job titles or 3 different jobs all rolled into one, or I don't know what it is. Could you, from a HR point of view, do you have any thoughts on this? Why we've got them? They're so big and they're so technical, and I can't imagine everyone ticks all those boxes. And I'm pretty sure they do say, well, if you don't tick all the boxes, but it's almost like, well, actually, we do want you to tick all the boxes.
From a perspective of the HR as to why, I'm not totally sure, but from my own opinion.
Yes, sorry, I meant from your own opinion. Is it not from the HR?
No, I think it's just
from your own opinion. It's purely, I'm not quoting Kirsty on anything of this. I want everyone to know that this is from Kirsty's and my personal views on this.
I think they're just trying to look too wide. And I think we need to they're wanting everything to be all encompassing. And sometimes within a department, it's actually better to have people that are more focused on doing more particular areas. So whether, for me, if I look at my own departments I used to manage, when I was recruiting into it, I'd be looking at the strengths those people had. Irrelevant to the kind of job description, I'd be looking at the strengths they had and then where the areas that I was missing and looking to recruit for that. Now, I was speaking to somebody in sales. They were a really good salesperson, their own admission, they weren't good at doing the proposals and the admin. So they used their initiative and they teamed up with someone on the department that was really good at that. And if you looked at their job description, yes, they were meant to do all the different steps, but they worked with their creativity and worked with their strengths. And they both went up to the top of the sales table because they were doing that elements that worked for them.
Which is incredible, and that's the, as they say, the out of the box thinking within this side of it. It's interesting, isn't it? When we think of this, it's almost like they've not defined the role, or they only have maybe a budget for a certain role, and they want someone to be able to jump between roles or something else. But genuinely, the consensus is, I'm always amazed that I'd like to see someone that was able to tick every single box within this.
I'm seeing like an octopus in my head, with loads of arms. It's not going to happen.
And then it's almost like I'd love them to just film, like a day in the life of what that role looked like, to be able to tick every single box. But look, all jokes aside, I think there needs to be some sort of, because it can be incredibly stressful. This day and age, when we are, there seems to be a vast amount of jobs that are continuously being put up. Everything's now online. And you have these things where you can, LinkedIn, it's like easy apply, and then there's upload your CV, and then it goes off to the ethos, and then it's, sometimes you get something back, sometimes you don't, and all of these different things. And it can be quite an emotional roller coaster to suddenly. And I think personally, speaking to other clients as well, that they're applying for lots of different jobs. So sometimes when it comes around, they've applied 50, 60 jobs, and then something comes back and they're like, I'm not too sure what I've applied for. And then they have to go through this process. So I'm not too sure why the recruitment side of it is not involved in every single organization. But I do feel it's something that, and I'm not knocking recruiters in any way, shape or form. I'm just saying that it does seem to be an industry at the moment that's, I don't know if it's the organization or it's the recruitment side of it, but there's definitely something of a miss on that.
Do you know what I would love? I would love if more job descriptions had a really short video explaining to me what the role was, because having to read it, and also the words that sometimes they use. And I used to do this in HR. We used to use fluffy terms. And then from my side, I'm looking at it and going, but what are you really wanting? And you start questioning. So if there is a short chat about someone explaining what they're looking for. And again, on the application side, yes, it's great that I've got my AI software and I can dictate what I say. Awesome. Do you know what I'd love also? Can I upload a really short video just to explain what it is I've done?
Yeah, and I find, excuse me, the uploading of the videos are normally for a creative role. So if it's social media or events management, then they ask for a video to be to show your creativity and these things. But genuinely, if it's for any other role, it does seem to be actually we want to know on paper what your results are, what your qualifications and everything else like this. So it's almost like a rigid process, isn't it?
Yeah, it shouldn't matter whether it's creative role, finance, HR, health and safety, in the States. Whatever it is, I think it's just giving people that option. You're not saying you have to,
but
it's just saying, what's going to work better for you.
Just want to share, Sarah, we're seeing more visible disabilities on TV, etc. Society is being more real yet unseen is still an issue, as you say. It is. I genuinely think. I guess because we live and breathe this every single day, and feel, when developments happen, we're kind of, finger on the pulse. We're like, oh my God, it's great. Like Made by Dyslexia brings out the dyslexia thinking and all of these different things that kind of, edging along. And then it feels like sometimes then you almost step out of LinkedIn or the LinkedIn bubble or all of these different other things. And then you come into the real world and then you're thinking, why isn't this happening? Or why don't you know this?
Yeah. And there's something you said there. It was someone shared something with me about Apple products actually recently, about the accessibility that naturally is in them. And I was blown away. I was like, this is already in my phone if I need it. It's not an add-on. It's not an additional cost, which it shouldn't be. But I was like, that's the way this should all be. It's just there.
And how did you find out about that?
I found out about that by someone linked in Dorset Council, and they put a link up. The video's called The Greatest, I think it is, and you can YouTube it. It's a really short one. I was really moved by it, and I was amazed about all of the, like I say, the accessibility functions that naturally are in a phone that I had no idea about.
And I guess because of this era of technology with AI and, our phones pretty much, I think maybe in 10 years, they'll change the word phone to something else, because it's not really a phone anymore. It's this incredible computer which you carry around for yourself. But do you keep yourself updated with these things, like what's coming out or what can kind of help you? Or do you just kind of stumble on them? Or how do you find out the latest things that can kind of help?
From other people normally. Because I'm not one that listens to the news or anything. For me, that doesn't work for me. So it is by talking to other people. I love working with my clients when they come up with a new thing and they're going, oh, I've been using this app. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I have a list of kind of random different information that then I'll go and look at. Because for me, having that lived experience from someone is really important. Yeah. I want to know from the person that it's working. How is it working? Why is it working? And I love my phone, don't get me wrong. And I turned it off recently. We went away, me and my husband. We thought it would be good, disconnect. Amazing, really enjoyed it. And then we had to giggle ourselves silly because we wanted to try and find a specific shop in a location. Yeah, we both looked at each other and went, okay. And it was that sudden realization, I would have just put it into the phone.
Yes.
So I had to do that old school thing, when we used to talk to strangers.
It is I guess, it's how much we depend on technology, I guess, and how much we depend on, my sense of direction is not the greatest. I have to go somewhere at least 10 times to remember it, basically, routes and lefts and rights and everything else like this. So satellite navigations are, an absolute must. I can't remember the last journey that I took without the sat nav going, and these aren't to big, huge, long destinations. These are something. So it is something that we move on. Have you had much experience around AI? Because I know, speaking to a lot of people, especially people with dyslexia, embracing AI now. I guess they're embracing it more. I mean, it has been out for quite some time. Have you had any experience of that, or have any of your clients had any experience of that?
Yeah, so there's various different AI. I mean, I find it really helpful in the sense of kind of just doing a brain dump, even if it's a case of scoping together an email. I might brain dump it in there and just say, give me a bit of a format. And I'm like, that's more coherent. I always change it and play it because it doesn't sound like me, and it needs to sound like me. But it takes away some of that procrastination. It takes away some of that, should that go there? Should that go there? It quickens up the process for me.
Yeah. I was speaking to Michelle Casson, who was one of our earlier guests from Moonhole School. And it was really interesting. Her thoughts on AI is how they use it within their school, which she openly admits on this. But it's really interesting how they use it, exactly what you said, Kirsty, in the sense that it's almost like the starting point of something. I know it's the classic thing, isn't it? If I'm quite a creative person, but if someone said you need to be in an office, sat in that chair, 9 a.m., and they're like, right, be creative, it's not going to work, because I'm probably creative at 4:30 that morning, or politics that night in a field, or in a train station or a coffee shop. So you have to work within those parameters. But it was really interesting. So she gets the students to use this as a starting point. It's that off the track start going. So, and then they have the basis, and then they can formulate around that. And I think it's quite comforting to hear how, not comforting, it's really interesting to hear how people are using this new technology. Well, I say new technology, but it has been around for quite some time. But it is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think people are getting to embrace it more. And you're saying about schools, one thing that I would love within schools is actually for the staff to be a lot more open about conditions so pupils know. And I was working with one school, and one of their finance members of staff is autistic and had ear defenders when the fire drill went off. A student saw that, and that for them meant the world. They didn't feel so alone. And it goes back to that at school. I had no knowledge of staff members that may have conditions or how this was going to look within the workplace. And the workplace was very, very different to school. So I think bridging that gap some way is really important.
How do we do things then? Because if we look at the school, I've always said this, the perfect kind of journey, I guess, would be in primary school. If you listen to this in the UK, so if we said primary school, then secondary school, sixth form, college, university, these things, and workplace, that would be the perfect thing, so that you had support in your primary school, your secondary school, your sixth form, college, and then university, and then workplace. But there's so many points where the support can drop. So I guess it's from if we took secondary school into college, for instance, there could be a drop-off point there. Or you could get support in college and university, but not in the workplace. How do you think we get to that stage? I mean, this is a long process. I'm not saying, and this is a big question, but Darren said he wasn't going to ask any big questions. It's just going to chat. But it's really interesting and necessary, isn't it? How we get to that whole process, that unicorn process, I guess, so that we've got that continuous support. And I guess the awareness needs to start from somewhere, and then the strategies and the plans and the belief in it.
And I think it all comes back to that acceptance and that plaiting it in together. And I agree, it's about that support. But even for some people, that word support can be taken in a negative. So it's just that way of doing things differently and experiencing differently, but getting everybody to experience things differently. So within the classroom, and I appreciate, teachers have a difficult job when you've got 30 kids. I totally get it. But, is there a way of going, today we're going to do things slightly differently. We're going to spend 10 minutes for those of us that can stand, doing a standing lesson to experience what it's like for everybody. Because I think helping that understanding's really important for everybody. And I've definitely learned a lot by other people. And that for me is how I learn best. So I think it's talking about it more, but it's also asking those individuals, what would have helped? How could have things been better? If we learn from the people that are actually going through the process, then that's where the best information is going to be.
Absolutely. And I think that's the question. And I'm sure from after the talks you do in organizations and the work that you do in organizations, I always remember the question gets asked, say someone joins the organization and they say, what do you need? And that is such an open question, because depending on where they are within their own journey and what tools, maybe it's tech, maybe it's screen overlays, maybe it's just a well-being side of it. Just, don't put me in a busy office next to a ping pong table, or the fluorescent lights that are shining down. And it's without going in with a prepared list of these are my to-dos and don'ts. It's almost like I see it's a again from my own personal appearance, like a work in progress. It's okay. So these are the things that I I know that I struggle with, or no,
Mhm.
and that I can thrive if not struggle with, use that terminology different. This is how I can thrive better. This is how I can succeed better. This is how I can work in this kind of environment. But it's
Mhm.
almost like, but I don't know what your environment's like. So ask me that question now. Let's work on this. Ask me that question in a week's time, 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time. And then it's like that, because work environments change. Workloads
Oh, totally.
can get more heavy, deadlines coming, different people joining the team, different peak times. The environment, I feel, would you say, Kirsty, changes? The landscape of the workplace changes so much.
Totally. And it also changes as we go and get older into what it's that word need, isn't it? It's not I need, I'd like it. And actually, do you know what? From a company, you're going to like it if I have it, because you're going to get more out of me. And for more, it's about having that catalogue. Not every, if someone said to me years ago, what support would be helpful? I'd have been like a rabbit in the headlights and gone, what's on offer? In a way, it's a bit like going to a restaurant, having some sort of idea of what a company does can be really beneficial. And like we say, a lot of these things can help other people as well. We're not just talking about neurodiverse conditions here. The AI dragon, great if someone's got arthritic wrists. It's different things. So having an idea that you can skim through would be great.
I think, thank you for your previous comments as well on the stuff that we're talking about. So please do keep your comments in, and we will answer these throughout the message. So thank you, Sarah and Amy, on the questions as well. Just want to share this one. Can one even know what kind of support they need? You're absolutely, spot on, as Kirsty mentioned as well. It's difficult to know. And I guess we're at that stage, depending on where the organization is. When you come in and say, oh, you then have to educate the organization on what it is that you need, and then what that actually is. And then it's a long conversation. So say it was a piece of tech, and they go, okay, I normally use this bit of tech. And they go, well, do you have that bit of tech? No, because it costs X amount of money. Okay, but you can get it through this. Okay, so what does that look like? And then, we can do this. Okay, so can you speak to us and let us know what it is? Okay. And then it's that whole process, isn't it? And I think if there was a certain awareness within an organization, and I'm not saying that every organization is going to know exactly, because things change all the time, and what you need within a certain role that you're doing in a different organization may be different to what you're doing now, because the task might be different, the environment might be different. Could be earphones where trying to block out the sound. And I think this is where we need to start having those conversations.
And access to work is phenomenal. Government funded, put there. A lot of companies do not know about it. A lot of people that are self-employed do not know they can use it as well. It has been fantastic. And then you do have a chat with someone about areas that you may find more frustrating, challenging, and they will give you some ideas of what might help you. I mean, I stumbled across literally the standing desk scenario. It was a previous boss of mine who wanted to stand in desk. He had a bad back. And I made a flippant comment of, wouldn't mind one myself. He said, "All do you want?" It was like a game changer. I was like, hello, why did I never think of this before?
And I think it is, access to work, which are, NATTC are our sponsors, and they deal with this thing all the time. So please do get in touch with them. But genuinely, I do feel that there's so much out there that needs to still be unraveled to be able to have these conversations, within ourselves and within organizations as well. So,
and it's speaking to companies like NATTC to say, what could help me, and sharing those ideas.
Absolutely. Kirsty, we are literally coming up to the end of our conversation. It is, I said it would fly by. Kirsty, how can people get in contact with yourself if they're not already connected with you on the social channels? But please feel free. How can people in our organizations get in touch?
Find me on LinkedIn under Kirsty Heap, spelled with a P at the end. Otherwise on Facebook, Google the Dyslexic Coach as well. I'll come up under that as well. But Kirsty, feel free to reach out, and I have no issue. If someone wants to ask a question, reach out. I'm free. Have a chat. Not a problem. I'll make my time.
And I think that's the wonderful thing within a community, and also with yourself, Kirsty, that you know, having people contact you and asking these questions. And I think that's from one question then stems from so many different things, and that is the beauty of the relationships that you built with your connections and the workplaces. So I can't thank you enough for joining us today, Kirsty. I hope you enjoyed our conversation.
Loved it. Thank you.
We will catch you again soon. Thank you so much, Kirsty. Thank you.
No worries. Take care. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.